What I thought I would do, I'm from GE Healthcare, but I thought I would share some stories, and I think this picture is a great one to kind of talk about where I'm coming from. So working for a large company, it can get kind of hairy in that hairball, and actually this image came from, I don't know if you've read the book by Gordon McKenzie of Orbiting the Giant Hairball, but that's kind of how I feel. Sometimes whether it's the rigor or some of the processes and some of the things that a large company can have, those are awesome things, and when you're in the middle of those, though, sometimes the real innovative ideas might not come to the forefront. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the concepts and projects I've worked on that have been orbiting the giant airball, and also orbiting the giant hairball with grace. So I think the first thing is, boy, when you're an astronaut and you're orbiting this giant hairball, is you have to be really humble because, you know, you're tethered out there on the end of this thing, and at any moment, you know, they could kind of cut you off. So I found this definition in the Urban Dictionary, and I actually highlighted the second definition, which I think is really cool. So this is one, cut one's ego down to size. It is not necessarily done in a rude fashion, but it should be. But what I like of that is just internalizing that and thinking about yourself a little bit, in that being really humble is a great place, and I'm going to talk to you a lot about design thinking and how empathy can drive what I think is really good design. And with that, this is a definition of empathy. I've seen a bunch of different definitions of empathy, and I really like this one from Daniel Pink. And he says, empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes, feeling what his and her heart, seeing with his and her eyes. Not only is empathy hard to outsource and automate, but it makes the world a better place. And why I like this is I really think empathy, and you've probably heard before, empathy is really walking, you know, a mile in somebody else's shoes or walking in somebody else's shoes. But I really think part of that humbleness is first taking off your shoes. So first taking off some of your preconceived ideas that you might have, whether that's around technology or what the user might want. And really put yourself in that position where you can really gain that firsthand, empathetic perspective from your users. And that's what I really want to show you, a really neat story today on that. So I'm actually going to share a story of how we worked on a project that was for the NICU. So this is a product that goes into the neonatal ICU. So this is for the really small premature babies and what kind of things we can do to help them get a great start on their life. So this is the NICU story that I'd like to share with you. And I'm going to go through on the top, in that kind of top left, it'll have kind of the flaring out and the focusing in, some of the phases and the steps that we go through in design thinking. And the first one is empathy. The first one is really, what do we do to go out and get that insight gathering directly from our families and our clinicians? So on the left side of this slide here, you see some of how we immerse ourselves in understanding what the families want and what the families are going through. And on the right side, it's a little bit about the hospital. So really, what are those clinicians and those nurses doing in the hospital? And on the left, one thing that I really noticed, and you can see it on the big picture there, is in the NICU, guys, there's like spaghetti wires everywhere, and there's literally alarms going off all over the place. And it has this kind of weird fluorescent light in there. It just looks like you're in a different world. And it's not a very welcoming place at all for a new family to get started here. And you can see, look at this dad here with his little baby. So remember, these are some babies. They can be 24, even 25 weeks in gestation, so they're really tiny little babies. And what they do in there is, you can see in that the picture kind of in the middle there, is they'll make actually homemade quilts to put on the top to maybe give a little bit more shade for the baby. Or they'll actually take cards that they've made and put them on the outside to kind of decorate a little bit. Because I think a lot of times when we spent time with the families here, we realized they were so excited to bring their new baby home. And they've probably decorated and gotten the nursery all set, ready to go to bring the baby home. And then this event has come up where the baby has come early, and they're in this crazy atmosphere here where it's not anything like what they have set up at home, and this was not their dream. So how can we make it a little bit different? And on the right side there, that is really the hospital, and when you watch them take some of these babies through the hallway, and they have this huge entourage of people, you can almost see in the snapshot there, and they're going through to move the babies from there to there. So we brought in a lot of this empathy, and I've highlighted 5 quick things just to share with you here in the consolidation of this empathy. And the first thing that was really powerful for us, and that's kind of why I started with those first slides of really understanding empathy and then really, walking in somebody else's shoes, but first take yours off, is that the human-centered nature of design thinking. We had our staff that would go and spend time in the hospital, and our lead engineer, Steve, actually was in the hospital and taking notes and interviewing the staff and families, and he actually saw a premature baby pass. So when you think of that, when you're actually there in the hospital and something that grave happens, that when you come back to your workplace, you are going to have that empathy, and it's going to be so deep within you that during all the meetings, doing all the critiques, everything in the product development cycle, you're going to be there for that family. And what we found out is there's so many multiple touches for this baby. So for the new baby that's really young, a lot of times they have breathing tubes and IVs and different things they have. So they're touching the baby a lot and working with them in the front. And then also, of course, they have to change the diaper. So they're handling the baby to do that. And everybody put up their thumb for a minute. So right in front of them. Oh, actually, this looks awesome. This looks like you're giving me the thumbs up. So if you look at your thumb, that's about the size of that diaper that's on the left there. So it almost looks like a Band-Aid that's going on. That's the size of the little baby's bum, is that size. That's how little these little guys are to do that. So the extra handling to change the diaper, you can imagine how small that is if it's basically the size of a Band-Aid if you're putting it on your thumb. And then also we have the equipment that's all in the room. It's got some crazy thing that are going on. And they actually did, so just thinking about the environment, I think they tested 200 different things in the room just to see if there was places where there were a little bit more germs collecting. Is there some infection control that they can do? I think the number one thing they found was the keyboard for the nurse. And I think the number 2 thing was the sponge by the sink. And the actual number 3 one was some of the equipment. So whether it was the knob there that you see the nurse holding that's silencing an alarm, or it's some of the different equipment that's in there that they're actually touching, was a huge thing we picked up in the empathy session. And then the ones on the right there, very powerful. So a lot of times when this situation happens, and mom's going to have a baby, and almost always she'll have surgery, so she'll have a C-section. And then the baby, sometimes it's in the same hospital if they've gone to one that has a NICU, and sometimes they're not. So mom's in this hospital, just had surgery, and they move baby to a different hospital over here and is in the NICU. And there's that real special moment when, whether they're in the same hospital or not, where mom gets to really meet and spend time with the baby. And one of our products that we had, they actually didn't go low enough, so when mom comes in, just had surgery in a wheelchair, can't stand up, couldn't have that connection with the baby that she wanted to have. So that was one of the things we had here. So you can see the one picture there, there's a mom that's just holding her little baby, or here, just kind of get that intimate touch that they have. So a lot of times in a critical thing to do in design thinking is when you flared out and gained all that empathy, it's very important to start focusing in and thinking about what is the point of view that we want to rally around to move forward. So this was our point of view statement for this project. So we met emotionally stressed parents in the NICU that eagerly want to bring their baby home. We are amazed to realize, and this is a quote from a staff member in Tennessee at a hospital, prematures baby literally die a little every time they're touched, and their parents desperately want to establish a connection with them. And then the last part of a point of view statement is, what is this really about? Allowing for early family connection so the families bond in the moments that matter. So it's very important to not boil the ocean and do something for everybody, to really pick a point of view to move forward. And this was a point of view that we picked for this project. I just want to show you a few of the steps that we went through so you can kind of get a feel for some of the design thinking that we did. So the next one is really kind of what I call the super flare. So this is the moment where you're going to come up with all the ideas around to solve some of those unmet needs and desires that you captured in your point of view. So you can see here a bunch of different ways that we did it. You're welcome, 3M. We used tons of sticky notes. So we've got them going all over the place. We use tons of them. You can see here we've got in the middle there's a mom that's helping us to prioritize those sticky notes. We have tons of visualization and sketches that are coming out to help us to get some of these early ideas out. And one thing that I really like is down on the right, there actually was a team that was struggling just a little bit in figuring out what some of these things could do, and they just said, let's just improv it. So somebody put on like a gown and said, I'm the nurse, I'm the parent. There was somebody that was the baby, and they actually went through and did a little bit of improvisation to see how can we figure out how to do some of these things and not just write things down, or maybe not even sketch them, but to actually bring it to life for that. And then on the right there, that's one of our first design sketches where we started thinking, what if we did a lot more than just have an incubator or a warmer there? What if we had a care station? So you can see we're thinking maybe we put it on a little bit more wheels so it's a little bit more mobile. We integrate a lot of the display and some of the things. We were even thinking, what in the room if we actually had a flat panel X-ray detector in there, and it would be very easy to move the baby over to that, and we could do a quick exam on the baby. The next phase is really thinking about what are some of those really impactful ideas that came out, and how do we want to prototype to build to learn? How do we want to move those things forward? And this is really about learning early and learning cheap. So you'll see a lot of super low fidelity here in doing the prototype. So one thing that came out, and actually that's Steve that's in the back there, he's the one that actually saw the baby pass. So you can imagine he's right in the middle of all this, helping us to work through it, is the idea of a baby Susan. So I think somebody had just gone to a Chinese restaurant and used the lazy Susan to pass the meals, He said, what if we had a baby Susan and you could actually rotate it, so if you're getting to the upper end of the baby and doing some things with the breathing tubes, or if you're changing the diaper, you could just do that. And so he said, what if we integrated even the scale in that, so you wouldn't have to move them to the scale to do that. And the hands-free, they looked at a lot of the different things that the staff does that maybe they could do so that you don't transfer the infection control, you don't transfer the germs, that you could do hands-free. And probably my favorite one is in the middle there, where they actually said, what if we had a cool shuttle that actually kind of docked to the unit that would have the oxygen? That's what those gray kind of plotter paper tubes are, and there's a toilet paper tube and some gauges and just hot glue, and coming up with a super low fidelity model to see if it even worked. And then what I really like about this one, I went to my office and I sat in my chair and it was like all out of whack, and I'm like, what is going on? And they literally took my casters off my chair to make this mock-up. So it's really about low fidelity and moving things forward. So what I want to kind of conclude with here is talk to you a little bit of some of these features that the team worked on to how to incorporate these in a product. So we talked a little bit about the baby Susan, so that's right in the middle there. So you see that little pad. So that's where the baby goes and it actually rotates around. We actually then integrated the scale, so the scale is integrated in there so that you don't even have to move the baby to a scale and then back. And then also you remember how we had the flat panel display off to the side. We actually figured out, the engineers figured out, how could we incorporate that in the actual system itself, so you could slide that underneath the baby. You could bring in an X-ray tube on the top, and you could actually do imaging and not move the baby or not touch the baby at all. And I think part of this that was really good is they were able to measure what they called the negative touches. So, the mom and the family touches are the positive touches, but those ones on changing the diaper and some of those things, they could actually reduce it down 58%. That was kind of the hardware side. This is the software side, so I love how the team integrated some of this. So this was Eric and Min helping us to, and the lower one there is kind of before, so you had the knob to silence the alarm. They came up with some really neat ideas on how to do gesture control to actually come up and have a proximity center to actually silence the alarm and some of the other interface items. They also worked a lot with the staff to say, hey, when it's dim and let's say mom and dad are taking a nap or sleeping, you could actually have the display wouldn't be so bright, so you wouldn't have to make that quilt on the top. You could actually have it up there. And then also the numbers on the display could be very large, because you can see over here on this lower one, you really can't see the numbers very well. So the nurse could maybe even just peek in the room, wouldn't even have to come in, and could see the critical items, the numbers that they need to know. And I love this because it actually has a first person to the interface. So if you look really close, it might be hard to read from where you are. It says, how am I doing? The weather inside, my weight is, it's all from the baby's point of view. And what we found here is parents take pictures of this, so it's almost like a postcard they can send to grandma and grandpa that maybe live out of state. Or there's some, there's cousins and aunts, so they can actually use this interface that used to just look like a DOS screen, and actually making that something very special. And if you look really close, when it dims down, it's dark at night, the giraffe, so we call it the giraffe because it kind of has a big head and kind of an arm, and then it has where the baby is that the giraffes actually just fall asleep. So they curl up and they go to sleep when it's nighttime. And the display dims, and it has that first person to it. And this was made a big difference as far as just the cleanability of the system. And here's the shuttle. So I worked with a designer, actually Sandy. He was in Bangalore in India, and he helped work on this one with us, and Steve and his engineering team in Maryland. And this was also to help reduce those touches down 58%. So if you look at that on the right side there, there's a nurse, and this is actually a unit that actually, almost a lot like that prototype you saw, it docks with a system and it has integrated oxygen and battery and all the gases they need to have. So they can actually dock it to the unit, and they can take that unit, let's say they're going to surgery, and it's just like you have a mobile NICU. You have everything there. And they can go, and if for some reason they have to wait in the hallway, they just wait in the hallway. The baby's doing fine. It's just like if they were back in the NICU. Or they go to radiology and they're waiting for a scan. They can wait there with the baby that way. So it really reduces the amount of touches you have to take the baby and move them from one system to the other. So this hallway entourage that you see kind of in the middle here, where people have IV poles and all this kind of stuff, they're trying to force their way down the hall. You can do it with 1 or 2 people that actually go that way. And then, of course, if you have to wait, you've got everything there. So this is kind of my closing slide, and I really like, one of the reasons that I really love this project was, in a lot of projects, you go out and get the empathy, you get a lot of this input from the users. And it's hard to get that all in the first rev of the product. In fact, it's impossible. So a lot of times those things just go away. And this team was relentless in the way that they looked at things, whether that was how to do the baby Susan, and they dropped it in at the beginning. Let's work on the interface a little bit, and let's make that perfect and really understand how that is, and do wireframes and test them and drop that in when it's ready. Let's have a parallel effort of an engineering team in India working on the shuttle, and when that's ready, let's drop that in. So they're able to, with the kind of staged release of this product, through some of those things over a period of time, they were able to double their revenue. And then they also were able to take their market share from 30% to 86% by really using design thinking and really using the steps to go through as a team to make this a better thing. And at the bottom is kind of the vision that the team had, which I think was so special, is that you guys have been in sports before, where you all huddle up and then you say, okay, what are we going to say? And you go, defense. So you defense, right? Our team on this one, we huddled up, and seriously, guys, this is what we said. We said, our whole vision and what we want to do, our mission on this project as a team, is sending moms and babies home healthy. And that's what we used to make all of our decisions and think about some of these things to really allow us to put a product out there that could really change the world. Thank you very much.